This video shows how to use quantizing tools in Cubase. Quantizing gives us the ability to record or edit MIDI notes so that they are aligned to a grid representing a steady beat or metronome. We can quantize MIDI to a grid or groove, and the values of this grid are user specified. Quantizing moves MIDI events and audio by snapping the events to the nearest musically relevant grid position. We will focus on quantizing MIDI events. For more information on quantizing audio, refer to the manual page 112. Quantizing is based on the original position of MIDI events and affects the starts, ends, and lengths of the MIDI events. Quantizing is designed to correct errors, but can also be used creatively. There are 3 ways to quantize MIDI events: quantize while recording, quantize an entire track, or quantize selected MIDI notes. There are 2 ways to access the Quantize panel. From the Edit menu, select Quantize panel, or open the Quantize panel from the toolbar. To begin the Quantize process, double-click to open the MIDI editor. Change the ruler display to bars and beats. This will display the number of bars, or musical measures, on the grid. Select the grid setting from the Quantize panel. This sets the number of divisions per measure. This setting will depend on the music in the project. I will work with 1/8 or eighth notes in this demonstration. 1/8 represents eighth note divisions, or 8 divisions per measure. Quantize will snap the MIDI events to the closest value on the grid. Watch how the grid changes when I select different settings. Let's listen to this beat before we quantize. There are some parts of the music where the rhythm is slightly ahead of the beat. Highlight the MIDI notes to quantize. Go to the Edit menu, select Quantize, or use the keyboard shortcut Q as long as the virtual keyboard is not displayed. Quantizing shifts each MIDI event to the nearest position on the grid. Let's listen to the quantized version. When we snap MIDI events to a grid, the music can sound predictable or mechanical, which is not always a musical result. The Quantize panel contains other quantized parameters to quote-unquote humanize MIDI playback. I will briefly describe the parameters, but we will focus on the grid, swing, IQ mode, randomize, and the MIDI CC functions. Refer to the help file 14 for detailed descriptions and uses of each parameter. Use the Quantize Presets pop-up menu to select a quantize or groove preset. Use the Save, Remove, or Rename preset to save a new preset, rename, or remove current settings. To save a preset, click Save Preset, or use the Save Preset button to the right of the pop-up menu. Cubase automatically generates a name based on the settings. Non-quantize creates a safety zone before and after the quantized positions. The events that lie within this zone, specified by a distance in ticks, will not be quantized. 120 ticks is equal to 1/16th note. This allows for slight variations when quantizing. The green lines in the middle of the quantize panel show the quantize grid, or the positions to which MIDI or audio is moved. Use the drop-down menu to change the quantize grid. The triplet translates into smaller subdivision options for the grid. In other words, the beats can be further subdivided in thirds. We can use the triplet and the dotted settings to quantize to a groove. A groove recreates an existing rhythmic feel by matching recorded music to a timing grid generated from a MIDI part or an audio loop. Randomize creates slight variations in quantization within the grid settings. Specify the distance in ticks to adjust the amount of randomization. Usually, quantized data is ignored by the controller, whose parameters include velocity, pitch bend, aftertouch, and others. When the MIDI CC button is activated, controllers related to MIDI notes automatically move with the notes when quantized. When the Auto Apply button is activated, changes are immediately applied to the selected notes. A good use of this feature is using a playback loop and adjusting settings to reach the desired result. IQ mode, or iterative quantize, applies a loose quantization. The MIDI or audio will move only part of the way to the closest quantized grid position. This decreases the strength of the quantization. We can use the swing tool to soften the mechanical nature of the quantization. The iterative strength percentage determines how close the MIDI or audio moves towards the grid position. Reset quantize reverts MIDI or audio, unless moved manually, to the original unquantized positions. This is also accessible via the Reset Quantize option from the Edit menu. Once you've chosen your quantize settings, click Quantize to apply. Let's make a few adjustments. Let's add a bit of swing, increase the iterative strength, add a slight randomization, and we'll leave the grid as is. Now let's listen to the result. We can also make adjustments on the fly by using the auto function. It is good practice to make as many adjustments as needed until you reach your desired result. There is an option to quantize while recording MIDI. To quantize while recording, activate the Auto Cue button on the transport panel. While recording, the notes are automatically quantized according to the quantize settings. I will demonstrate the Auto Quantize tool when recording this clap sound. I will purposely play off the beat so that we can see how the Auto Quantize tool works when recording. Record Enable the track. I've activated the metronome to have a click track while recording, and click record. Let's listen to the playback. This playback will be quantized. Just for fun, I'll also record a hi-hat sound and add a little bit of swing. Let's listen to the auto-quantized version in playback.